Hey guys, what's going on? I'm gonna talk today a little bit about the U.S. education system. This is probably gonna be one of my longer videos. I'm gonna try and keep it under 15 minutes like I usually do, but we'll see where it goes. Overall, gonna start off the video by saying I'm not an expert of any sort on this subject. I haven't done extensive research on our education system and the success rates and compared it to other education systems, and I don't have a ton of knowledge about how education systems work in other countries. So these are purely my observations and thoughts based on the people I've met in school and the general consensus when I've had this conversation with other people. But I do think it's pretty safe to say that the vast majority of people agree that the U.S. education system is far from ideal. So my plan for this video is I'm going to talk about how I would restructure or adjust the way our education system works right now. And there's not a ton of things that I have enough knowledge of where I'm going to say that there should be dramatic changes, but there's one big change as a general vibe that I think should happen, and you'll very clearly see that in a moment. But to start off with, I still believe that a 3-level education system works pretty well, which is elementary school, secondary school, post-secondary school, which is the way it is set up now in America pretty much. There's pre-K and then graduate school, all that kind of stuff. But I'm focusing on the main meat and potatoes of what the education system is in America. For elementary, I think ages of all that's still pretty good. The 5 to 12 years old, K through 6th grade, if you're doing things that way. So it's a pretty good range to really start pushing things. I think, the sooner the better as far as getting your kids adjusted to talking to other kids and making sure they can speak well and all that. That could start in all preschool stuff, but teaching them how to read and write and do math, I think K through 6 is sufficient. And really this elementary education is primarily meant for giving kids general knowledge about subjects so that they could move forward in secondary school, and also a lot of interpersonal skills. I think a lot of the interpersonal skills have kind of gone to the wayside a bit in terms of making sure kids speak well, they could generally associate with other people and be social and all those kind of aspects, because those things are very, very important in pretty much any track of life as far as a career goes. There's very few careers where you can completely isolate yourself from other people. So making sure that you could talk to people on a reasonable level and pick the right words, be sociable, things like that are important. In terms of the actual subject matter, I still think most of the general things that are taught in elementary school are pretty good in the general topic. Reading and writing, obviously, speaking, and to elaborate on speaking more, not only having a good vocabulary and using proper tenses and all that kind of stuff, but also being able to publicly speak, up for presentations, things like that. Be able to present yourself in that way, I think, is very, very important in a child's very young skills. Those are things that should be started young, get kids used to presenting in front of groups and speaking out loud, saying their thoughts in coherent ways that make other people understand. Those kind of things need to be pushed more. And then for elementary school in general, I think you could really start kids on a lot of the basics of pre-algebra, world history, U.S. history, the sciences in general. All that could definitely be touched on a bit in elementary school, giving a good foundation for later on, and it helps show what kids are leaning more towards. So if they are really good at writing and speaking but not great at math, it's an early sign that maybe they're more of an English-based mind. I'm going to get into a lot of that in a moment. But one other thing I want to mention as far as subject matter for elementary school is a second language is an absolute must. Pretty much every country that I could think of or know of in general pretty much forces their kids to learn at least one other language. For example, I visited an elementary school in Israel, and every single kid that I met there as young as age 8 years old was able to pretty coherently speak to me, not only in Hebrew, Israeli languages, but also in English. They were able to speak to me in English well enough to hold a conversation about their favorite TV shows and all that. Another very important thing that I think gets pushed to the wayside in elementary school that needs to be brought back up is there needs to be a lot more hands-on activities, a lot of tactile learning, especially kids that are young. I feel like it's pretty common that they do a much better job if they can kind of have a hands-on interaction with what they're trying to learn about, a lot of the building blocks and all that. And also it helps start to break down the stigma that I'm going to talk about in a little bit of trades not being an acceptable route for people to go post-secondary. I think that needs to be knocked off immediately because there's a lot of people that are perfectly fit for trade jobs, and it's a well-paying field, all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people consider it not as good as college for some reason, and I'll get more into that in a second. But another, just clearing things up, I mentioned that starting to learn about presenting yourself very young is very important, and I think a lot of these things, if you start it young, the secondary education, the second language rather, presentations and all that kind of stuff, if you do it young, it'll be easier to grow on it later. Definitely hit on the different types of learning styles. Again, this goes back to different people being able to learn from different types of ways, whether they're a hands-on person, a visual person, an auditory person, those kind of things. The period style, I think, works good enough for elementary school. The 8 periods a day or whatever it may be for like an hour each that can work for elementary school. I'm going to mention in secondary school, I don't think it's as sufficient. It would make a lot more sense if the teachers rotate to each class rather than the classes rotating. I don't know if it was just my school, but everyone in my class, all 25 of us or whatever it was, would move classrooms in the middle of the hallway. Instead, it'd make a lot more sense for the teacher to rotate classrooms, and I know that's done in other countries or maybe even other schools within America. Encourage students a lot to socialize, as I've mentioned a couple times, and identify the issues that some kids are having early on so they can be corrected, because a lot of things like a stutter or social skills not being up to par, a lot of those should be fixed while they're still young, because if you wait till high school or something to fix those kind of issues, you're going to have a problem with actually making changes. Now to get into secondary school, which is your 7th to 12th grade, roughly ages 13 to 18. The way I would do secondary school is that I would start breaking kids up into tracks. I would have different tracks for different type of skills that kids have and start exploring careers very early on and have those careers be a wide variety, not just careers that you could do after you go to college, careers that you could do right out of high school that might require a little bit of extra certification or teaching, but careers nonetheless immediately, not just the college route, because a lot of secondary school, high school level American schools push very heavily towards sending kids to college, and college is absolutely not meant for everyone, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But overall, these tracks, the way I'm thinking is that each student should kind of be leaning more into identifying what skills they're best at as soon as 7th and 8th grade. If I were breaking things down, I would have a liberal arts track, which has like teaching, English, news, all those kind of personal written type of educations and jobs. A STEM track, a management track, trades, which is a lot of hands-on, plumbing, electrician, those kind of things, similar to the STEM track, but more hands-on. Automotive, all those kind of things, carpentry. They're much more hands-on thing than a textbook kind of thing. Law and military would be a good track. A specialty track, which has a lot to do with like, if a kid's a savant when it comes to music or acting or athletics, he should have a separate track kind of made for him or her that fits that skill set. The main thing of this is that we would have to very quickly stop the stigma of college being the only option for every kid. College is probably not the best option for a majority of people, never mind most people. I feel most people would probably be better off after being in college 4 years. There's a lot of people in my college that shouldn't be in college. It's not saying that they're too dumb for college or anything like that. It's just not the best suited field for them. It's not where they're meant to be. They should be in more of a trade scenario working. I'm in the civil engineering department. I would say it's at least a quarter of my civil engineering department are students that would be much better fit as construction managers or even laborers doing construction work in the field, those kind of things, rather than being civil engineers. The way I would basically do these tracks in a secondary school setting is rather than squeeze in a schedule with a lot of mandatory classes the way it is now in high school, I would try and break things up to have a lot of electives for students. And by electives, it's classes that will cater more towards what their track is. For example, if you're a math-based student, you don't need 6 years of English with all kinds of literature and things like that. You could hit some general things for that. Or at the very least, your elective classes later on, let's say you have an English elective later on, that class should be a math-based writing class where you write technical reports and create presentations about scientific proofs, things like that. Same thing for English. An English student doesn't need to know how to do calculus. It just simply they don't. Some English students might need to do statistics, and statistics is something that some English students will never get to see. So that would be a good senior year math class for an English student. And then the biggest thing with this elective system is that trades students would need to be able to have more of an opportunity to work hands-on and do trade-type activities. Most schools have like one woodshop class, maybe an engineering class, but that's not enough. If there's a student that's meant to be a trade-type student, rather than going to trade school, our overall education system should be able to cater for those students so that they could do trade-based classes in their high school. I already mentioned how the core classes should be based on the 10 cities tracks a bit. We also should be bringing back in high school a home ec lifestyle type class where you're talking about bills and budgets and everything as minute as doing laundry and boiling water and taxes, car maintenance, how to change a tire, all those little things that you need to know in life that basically no one ever learns. And ultimately, on the spot, most people Google the answer, which I guess is fine. But realistically, those are things that could very easily be taught as a home ec class very early on. You could also do first aid and those kind of things as a home ec lifestyle class. And I would probably switch this out instead of like your gym class. Instead of that period that is usually wasted on gym where it takes 15 minutes for kids to change and unchange anyway, utilize your time better and have a home style class where you're doing these kind of things. And then one idea I'm going to steal, I think, from Japanese culture, pretty much based on my watching of anime, is that there should be a heavily encouraged or more or less mandatory after-school activity that kids need to do, where it's really more of an after-school activity. It's more like an elective, but rather than it being an elective that's very class study-based, it could be an elective based on what that student is interested in. So if it's an English student and they're super into reading, they should more or less be forced or heavily encouraged into joining a book club after school. If it's an athletic person on one of those specialty tracks that wants to be an athlete, all those kids are on the soccer team or the football team, whatever it may be. Also in the secondary school, I think it's very important that kids get exposed to many career options, not just career options you could follow if you get a college degree. Career options are good for that student based on what their capacity level is. Not every student in the world can be an engineer per se or a financial manager. Some students just won't have that skill set. Some of it might be due to intelligence. Most of the time, it's more due to how that person learns and what kind of skills they are best at. So those are things that need to be accounted for. And then money and time is wasted on kind of pushing kids into college. And not only is that money and time for the student wasted, the country's money and time is wasted by pushing kids that are not meant for college into college. And going even deeper than that, I've seen a significant issue in at least my college education where classes are watered down and slowed down because there's some students that just can't keep up with the material. And it is not because they're dumb. It's because they are not meant to be doing this type of material. They are not in the right field for themselves. So a lot of the post-secondary education stuff would be greatly improved if we implemented weeding out what kids are better suited for different kinds of tracks. So getting into that post-secondary education at 18 years or older education, college obviously would still be a very good thing for something like a STEM major, but every track I believe should lead to some type of post-secondary education. But by post-secondary education, I'm not talking about just college or even 2-year associate school or beauty school for if you want to be a hairdresser growing up and that's what's best for you. Not just formal education, but for example, in trades, the best way for tradespeople to learn trades is by being in the field and getting their hands dirty. If you want to be a mechanic, sure, you can go to an automotive school and learn a couple things for like a year. But after that, a lot of it should be based on those people going directly into work and working on cars or whatever it may be. This also goes for the specialty tracks. Obviously, if you're going to be a famous actor, and that's what you're being groomed for from a young age, a famous actor doesn't need to go to college. You don't need to go to acting school to be an actor. That's all baloney. An actor needs to have more experience on stage actually acting. The formal learning about ethos, pathos, and logos of acting and all those kind of things is not going to significantly affect how good of an actor I believe someone is. That's all directing and those type of things. Then, of course, law and military tracks should very quickly go right into boot camp, pretty much the way it does now. A lot of this is very similar to the way things are done now, but I believe it could be structured much easier, and a lot of it is about changing the stigma of forcing everyone to college and any other option being a lesser option. That's the main issue I've seen in American school systems. With that, I think I'm going to try and wrap it up here. There was a couple more things I was going to mention, but nothing important enough. I want to squeeze it in and make this video go another 5 minutes. So, sorry I talked real fast, real loud, but in any case, thank you all for watching as you always do. I'll have another video out for you tomorrow, and have a nice day.